Hey, scholars, welcome back. This is Mr. Floyd, and today we will be diving deep into the roots of thought, knowledge, and language. That's right. We are reteaching Unit 1 on philosophy, epistemology, and etymology. So let's sharpen those minds and get wise together. So let's start with the big one, philosophy. Philosophy is the fundamental questioning of our existence, knowledge, values, reason, mind, and language. It comes from the Greek philosophia, which means love of wisdom. Philo means love, and Sophia means wisdom. But what is wisdom? That's the question. What is wisdom? If philosophy is the love of wisdom, what counts as wisdom? Now, let's talk about what wisdom is not. Wisdom is not knowledge. No, no, no. Wisdom is not intellect. No, no, no. Wisdom is the deep, intuitive understanding of human nature. Write that down, ladies and gentlemen. Wisdom is the deep, intuitive understanding of human nature. So, if we consider knowledge to be facts and intellect to be what we do with facts, then wisdom goes beyond even that. Wisdom is how we use our knowledge and create it and sort of develop it in something that we can pass on that uses our ability to think critically. And we'll talk a lot about critical thinking because that is a skill that is central to ACE General Paper. Well, let's take a look at some of these philosophies. Socrates says, wisdom is knowing you don't know everything. Aristotle says, wisdom is the highest form of knowledge tied to virtue and the good life. Confucius says, wisdom is living in harmony with moral principles. And Buddha says, wisdom comes from seeing reality clearly, free from illusion. Now, there are some key ingredients to wisdom. And I know we're talking a lot about wisdom and we're supposed to be talking about philosophy, but it's getting there. Just bear with me. The key ingredients for wisdom are perspective, empathy, humility, ethical grounding, and practical application. Now, let's go back a little bit and talk some more about Socrates. You know this quote, you've memorized this quote. Socrates says, the unexamined life is not worth living. Socrates is known as the father of Western philosophy. He is the one who shifted the focus from the natural world to ethics and virtue and how we as humans should live and exist. We credit Socrates with developing the Socratic method, and this is a way of asking deep and probing questions that challenge assumptions. So when you think of the Socratic method, think of the Socratic seminar. He inspired and continues to inspire generations of thinkers. Plato and Aristotle were his students. His life and trial became a lasting symbol of the struggle for truth and free thought. Did you know that he was executed by the government, by his government, for corrupting the minds of young Athenians? He just wanted young people to be able to think, and he got executed for that. So these are some of the skills that philosophy teaches. Philosophy teaches us to think critically. It teaches us how to grapple with life's big questions. It teaches us the diversity of human thought. It teaches us the precision in language and reasoning. It teaches us how to reason ethically and to consider historical perspectives and to become comfortable with uncertainty. Philosophy teaches us a particular stance towards the world. Philosophy branches into several areas, each asking very different questions. These are just a few of the areas that philosophy will diverge. Metaphysics. What is reality? What is existence? Are we really here? Do we really exist? Epistemology, and we'll talk a little bit more about epistemology shortly. How do we know what we know? What is knowledge? How was knowledge constructed? Where does it come from? What is it made of? Ethics. What is right and wrong? Who gets to decide what's right and wrong? What's right for one culture might be wrong for another. What's right for one generation may be wrong for another. Logic. What is reasonable? What makes sense? Who gets to determine what is logical? Aesthetics. What is beauty and art? Where does the line start? How do we determine the difference between graffiti and art? And then politics. How should societies be organized? How should they be managed and structured? Right? So these are just a few of the branches of philosophy. We will talk about several of them throughout this course. Now let's zoom in on epistemology, which is the study of knowledge. Epistemology comes from the Greek word episteme, which means knowledge, and logos, which means study. And we ask ourselves these big questions whenever we're considering epistemology, the study of knowledge, right? The philosophical study of knowledge. We'll ask ourselves, what does it mean to know something? How do we know when we know something? How is knowledge different from belief? And how is that belief different from opinion? Can we really be certain of anything? So these are just some of the big questions that we ask. And we're going to answer a few of those questions right now. We're going to grapple with the difference between belief, opinion, and knowledge. We're going to grapple with whether or not we can really know anything for certain. And we'll talk about some of the sources of our knowledge, and then whether that knowledge is truly worth knowing. Let's start with some of the sources of knowledge. We have these 5 sources: perception, reason, memory, testimony, and introspection. We'll talk more about perception. Actually, we'll talk a lot more about perception throughout this course. But perception is generally how you interpret information. Reason is your logical, your independent and critical thinking and deduction. We're making inferences and claims as we reason. Memory. This deals with your personal past experiences, the events that shaped you and made you into the person that you are. Testimony. These are the experiences of others, the events and ordeals that others went through that make them who they are. And their willingness to share those experiences can be a source of knowledge. And then introspection. We've talked quite a bit about self-awareness, right? This ability to understand yourself, your thoughts, your beliefs and values. So these are our sources of knowledge. But now we're going to talk a little bit about how knowledge is constructed. And the standard philosophical definition of knowledge begins with JTB, or justified true belief. This is a theory that suggests that in order for something to become knowledge, it must first be true, and then it must be a belief, and then you should be able to justify it. So if something is true, you're making a claim, something that you believe, and then if you believe it, then you should be able to justify it. Knowledge is not formed unless all three of these conditions have been met. If only two of these conditions have been met, then what you have is a belief. If only one of these conditions have been met, then what you have is an opinion. So the difference between an opinion is it's just your claim, and a belief is a claim that you deeply believe in, and knowledge is something that you can justify. Consider this example. I say it is raining. That's my fact. And so far, it's just a fact. Now I need to believe it to be raining. And I actually do. I believe it's raining. But can I justify that it's raining? Of course. I can look outside and I can see the rain. I can listen and I can hear the rain. If I walked outside, I would feel the rain and I would get wet. That, at that moment, at that point, I've created knowledge. And we've talked about knowledge and sort of the significance and importance of knowledge. Knowledge is something that should be protected and preserved. We want to multiply it and increase it. We want to pass it on to the people that we care about and love. So when I create this knowledge that it's raining, it's something that I want to tell my neighbors and tell my family and tell my friends because it's knowledge. It's something that they too can find useful. They can pass it on and share it and multiply it. And then we can all, as a community, we can all benefit from this knowledge. We can determine whether or not we need to get umbrellas. We can change our clothes. We can decide if we're going to go out at all because we now have this knowledge. It's not an opinion. It's not a deep belief. It is knowledge. Now, there are two major schools of thought when we consider the development or construction of knowledge. The first is rationalism. Rationalism. This means that we believe knowledge comes from reason and innate ideas. And a very famous thinker who supports this school of thought is Rene Descartes, who said, and you should know this, I think, therefore I am. But the second school of thought is empiricism. Empiricism. And this is the understanding that knowledge comes from sensory experiences. And a very famous thinker who supports this school of thought is John Locke. John Locke believed in tabula rasa. In other words, the blank slate. We are all just empty vessels waiting to be filled with experiences. And those experiences or sources of knowledge, that is how we create and produce knowledge. So these two schools of thought, rationalism, it comes from innate ideas and reason, or empiricism, it comes from experiences. Some examples of rationalism would be math or science. Math is a very logical and reasonable source of knowledge. One plus one logically equals two. But empiricism is also a, a source of knowledge. My experience is that if I touch the hot stove, I'm going to get burned, right? Because the stove is hot. So I make the claim that the stove is hot. I believe that the stove is hot. And so I can justify it because when I touch it, it burns me. I scream, I jump back, I get a blister, and I create knowledge through my experiences. So we have these two schools of thought. But these are the reasons why epistemology matters. It helps us to understand assumptions. It improves our decision making and critical thinking. Here's this term, critical thinking again. It makes us careful about what we accept as true. And It allows us to view the world, our everyday lives, and the input that we receive through critical lenses. Finally, let's talk about etymology, the study of where words come from and how they change. So, etymology is the study of the origin and history of words, understanding how words evolve over time. Etymology is the study of the origin and history of words. So, we're looking at how words change, how words evolve, how their meaning, how their pronunciation, how their spelling change over time. This allows us to understand the roots of language, and it allows us to better connect between cultures and see how language has sort of inspired and contributed to different cultures and nations. We study etymology because it improves vocabulary and reading comprehension. It helps us to decode unfamiliar words by recognizing roots and affixes. Etymology reveals historical and cultural influences on language, and it allows us to deepen our appreciation for literature and word choice. These are the four components of etymology. Four components. The first is the root. This is the base part of the word, right? So if we consider a base to be success, that would be the root. Prefix. These are letters added to the beginning of a word, and they will change the meaning. So an example of a prefix would be pre, un, dis, in. These are all letters that are added to the beginning, and they will change the meaning. And then we have suffixes. These are letters that are added to the end of the word. They don't change the meaning, but they will change the form and function. They will change how we use the word. Full would be an example of a suffix. So if I go back to my example root, success, if I add un to that root word, success, now we have a totally different word. It means the exact opposite of success. Unsuccessful is the exact opposite of successful. But success is used differently than successful. So if I look at this whole word, unsuccessful, I can identify the root, I can identify the prefix, and I can identify the suffix. Now, the fourth component of etymology are loan words, and these are simply words that we borrow from other languages. An example of a loan word would be chocolatl from Nahuatl, which we have translated to chocolate. So chocolate is a loan word. It comes from the Nahuatl chocolatl. These are some of the tasks that etymologists performs. They trace historical usage in texts and records. They compare related words in different languages. They study changes in pronunciation and spelling over time. And they use linguistic reconstruction to hypothesize ancient forms. Just wanted to share some fun facts about etymology, right? Did you know that English borrows over three? I'm sorry, did you know that English borrows words from over 350 languages? Did you know that the word girl used to mean any young person, not just females? Did you know that Shakespeare invented or popularized hundreds of words that we still use today? That's it, ladies and gentlemen. That's a quick recap of Unit 1 on philosophy, epistemology, and etymology. And if you have any lingering doubts or questions, please make sure that you come see me so that we can gain some clarity. But before we sign off, I just wanted to leave you with a final did you know? Did you know that Rene Descartes doubted everything except his own thoughts? Be like Rene, ladies and gentlemen. Mr. Floyd out.